Making a sequel to Data East's 1994 arcade game Windjammers is a tricky proposition. It isn't really a sequel we need. Windjammers delivered pretty well on its thesis of how everything, even an antique video game like Pong, could be improved with a heaping dose of 90s toot. But here we have Windjammers 2, and it has a lot to prove. Namely, it has to prove that you can stuff even more cream into an already perfect eclair and not have it explode. Windjammers was known for its easy to learn, difficult to master gameplay, and piling anything on top of that risks having it buckle. Windjammers is the sport of trying to find out how far up an opponent's goal you can ram a plastic disc. It's simple. Swing that saucer past the other guy and into the other side and gain points. Accumulate more points until they're sufficiently humiliated or time runs out, and you win. The obvious improvements are in the aesthetic. The graphics are redone in a more hand-drawn style, while the music is higher quality while retaining its unique 90s vibe. The roster of frisbee flingers has been expanded to 10 from the original 6. There are also 10 arenas to choose from, double what was available in the original game. And thankfully there's now a junkyard court, so you can complain about how it gives your opponent an unfair advantage, because they're trash. Those are the most immediate changes, but the more impactful ones are under the hood. Notably, the game stretches the controls from a simple 2-button arcade game to 4. 5 if you're feeling really sassy. Added to the throw and lob buttons is jump and deflect. Jump allows you to grab the disc out of the air and smash it down on the opponent's side of the court, whereas deflect does just that, immediately sending the projectile back to the opponent. Technically, you could already deflect by throwing the disc the moment you caught it, so I suppose the only advantage to smacking it is that it might catch the opponent off guard. My issue with playing Windjammers 2 is that the throw button is also the dash button, and you're almost always dashing to intercept the saucer. Asking me to take my finger off the dash button was a bit of a tricky proposition, since I felt like my momentum was best maintained with just the throw and lob. However, it should be noted that online play wasn't available to me, and I don't know any professional Windjammers, so I didn't get a lot of time to hone my strategy against fickle-brained humans. Maybe those extra 2 buttons would make a difference in throwing off someone who isn't fueled by math, but I spent most of my time in Windjammers 2 competing with the program. The fabled 5th button isn't technically necessary. It's the EX ability, and while it's R on the Switch version, you can also press throw and lob together to trigger it. Simply, a special bar was added that gradually fills throughout the course of the match, and when it's full, you can either use it to immediately hurl a powered up plate, or send one that's on your end of the court into the air. Previously, you would perform these charged chucks by standing under an airborne disc for a sufficient amount of time. Out of all the additions, the EX meter is probably my favorite. I fail to see how more fire on the court could do anything but make Windjammers 2 more radical. More opportunities to speed up gameplay and instantly put on the pressure is just so satisfying. Catching a powered up throw and reversing it back at your opponent feels so good. The arcade mode is decent fun when you don't have a +1. It takes you through a series of matches, allowing you to choose between 2 different turfs up until the final round. 2 bonus rounds are also inserted, but unfortunately I do have to reveal that you don't get to trash a car. Still, the minigame where you throw your frisbee to be fetched by a good boy entirely makes up for it. Which is something to keep in mind. Windjammers 2 adheres very closely to its arcade roots. The rather minor but impactful changes almost make it feel like it could have been released 2 years after the first Windjammers. That will probably be a relief to the game's original following, but anyone new to the series should know what to expect. It is largely a game that is designed for versus play, and while there is a single player option, you will most likely only get your money's worth through competition. If that doesn't interest you, neither will Windjammers 2. I also need to point out that Windjammers 2 has the mentality of a fighting game. While you can get by mashing buttons, the real action starts when you gain the ability to read and react better. The potential for high-level action is there, but I wasn't able to really experience it or see it. It makes judging the new additions difficult, as I'm not really sure how they'll affect competitive play. From my perspective, the only major gameplay improvement is the addition of the EX gauge. Everything else feels less meaningful. However, it really depends on how the community utilizes the game that will define its worth. Whether or not players will prefer the simplicity of the original or the added pizzazz of Windjammers 2 is going to dictate whether it's a success, a failure, or something in the middle. For what it's worth, I enjoyed my time with Windjammers 2. It sucked me in for hours as I slaved over a hot arcade stick. The single player is very challenging, but it can only hold the overall product up for so long. It's also not as transcendental as something like Streets of Rage 4 was in its revival of an old formula. It is, as it says on the box, a sequel. It might as well come out in 1996 for all that adds. But it's also $20, which I think is the right price if a sequel is exactly what you're looking for. It's also made with a scoop of love for the original title, which comes across in its faithfulness and appearance. DotEmu obviously put a lot of effort into pleasing fans, and it's going to be that player base that makes the final assessment on whether or not it's a disc worth catching. The best I can do is tell you that it's at least worth the sand in your shoes. Thank you for watching today's review. Remember to like and subscribe for more content like this. If you'd like to read the written review, you can head on over to Destructoid.com, where you can also look at news and other video game reviews.